I can't picture you as a mother.
Why not?
I don't think anybody thinks of you as a mother, having a little girl. It's great that you said that.
Everybody knows I'm Mom, I guess.
Are you a good mother?
Oh, yes.
Mama Cass was having a terrible time behind the scenes, despite having the voice that made California Dreamin' famous. She was rejected, made fun of, and ultimately starved to fit in because she was 300 pounds. Unfortunately, her heart was also ruined by the diet that helped her shed 120 pounds. The cruel jokes persisted even after she passed away, with the falsehood that she choked on her sandwich. Now, half a century after the woman's death, her daughter is disclosing the truth. Alongside a powerful vocalist from the rock genre. In Baltimore, Maryland, on September 19, 1941, Cass Elliot's mother, Ellen Naomi Cohen, entered this world. Her parents, Philip and Bess Cohen, were tenacious immigrants from Russia who had settled in the United States in the second generation of their family. While her mother had nursing training, her father ran a lunch wagon company that catered to construction workers. Because of their Jewish heritage, the family was able to persevere despite their financial struggles. There was continual change throughout Cass's early years. So that her mother could take care of her newborn sister, she was sent to live with her grandparents when she was 7 years old. Even more so, she felt abandoned when she was so little. That emotion lingered, compounding the lifelong struggles she would face with self-doubt. The prejudice she faced from others due to her weight was another obstacle she had to overcome. Cass didn't conform to society's rigid standards of beauty. Despite the scrutiny she was under, she sought solace in an activity that allowed her to let her guard down. Music. She found solace in performing for those closest to her, but soon realized that she needed to find a way to break free of the pressures she was under. Over time, her father's business became successful, despite its ups and downs. During Cass's adolescence, the family finally settled in Alexandria, Virginia after many moves. After a short stint at George Washington, she transferred to Forest Park High School in Baltimore when her family relocated back there. There her passion for performing began to take form. In 1959, she landed a bit part in a summer stock production of The Boyfriend in Owings Mills, thanks to her participation in school plays. It became crystal clear after that. She had found her life's purpose in this. The harsh reality of societal expectations followed Cass even as she found her passion. When she was a teenager, her weight had increased to about 180 pounds, making her nearly twice as big as many of her classmates. Particularly when it came time for auditions, people began to make cruel jokes and rejection became routine. She wasn't the stereotypical Hollywood actress, and some casting directors wouldn't even consider her. She was determined not to let the pain deter her. She developed a huge, captivating personality that people couldn't help but notice, all while using humor as a protective barrier. Ellen Naomi Cohen made the decision to start over while she was a senior in high school. She began going by the name Cass, which may have been an influence from actress Peggy Cass or just her own preference. In later years, she included Elliot in honor of a friend who had died away. This was far from a simple rebranding. It was a place where she could finally be herself, free from the constraints of her previous identity. She relocated to New York City after finishing college with the intention of pursuing a career in theater. But aspirations failed to cover expenses. She did the best she could by working as a cloakroom attendant at the Bitter End, a famous Greenwich Village nightclub. It was a venue for emerging artists, and Cass made sure her voice was heard. She would try to get people to notice her by performing for agents and patrons whenever she could. The path to achievement was not smooth. Musicals such as I Can Get It For You Wholesale had her audition, but she was passed over in favor of future stars like Barbra Streisand. She was rejected by casting directors multiple times due to her weight. Cass didn't conform to the industry's strict standards for what a leading lady ought to resemble. However, she remained unfazed by the possibility of rejection. She continued honing her craft by taking on whatever little acting roles she could find. She was the type to seek out alternate entrances if necessary. When she became a member of the folk trio The Big Three in 1962 alongside Tim Rose and Jim Hendrick, things began to move forward. As folk music continued to gain popularity, the group became more well-known. Not only did they play coffee shops, but they also made guest appearances on Johnny Carson's The Tonight Show and Hootenanny. The banjo song was just one example of how their music fused folk with pop, giving them a distinct style all their own. However, the band parted ways due to creative differences, even though they were becoming increasingly successful. Even though Cass and Jim Hendrix's marriage was far from passionate, it did take place during this time. According to some accounts, he was trying to evade the military draft. This already difficult time in her life became even more so when, for some reason, their professional and personal lives became intertwined. Cass would go on to form a band with Denny Doherty, Zell Janowski, and Jim Hendrix in 1964 known as the Mugwumps. Even though the band was talented, folk music was losing popularity due to the rise of rock and the British invasion. They were only in place for 8 months. They made the most of their time together. As they recorded hits like Everybody's Been Talkin', Cass's strong voice was on full display, and she made connections that would change her life. It might have felt like yet another setback when the Mugwumps broke up. Instead, it became the catalyst for a greater achievement in her life. It wasn't an easy road for Cass Elliot to formally join the Mamas and Papas in 1965. The leader of the band, John Phillips, was apprehensive about inviting her inside. His voice sounded out of key with the rest of the band. But that wasn't all. For John, Cass's weight was a public embarrassment that could derail the band's career. She was obviously not what he had in mind, as he made it plain. Denny Doherty, who was Cass's bandmate in the Mugwumps, advocated on her behalf. Producer Lou Adler and Michelle Phillips shared her belief that she belonged to the group. There was no way Cass was going to wait for their green light. They were practicing in the Virgin Islands, so she went with them. She joined them in song until they were compelled to pay attention. On a particular evening, the four of them sang a duet. When that happened, things started to shift. A previously unseen blending of their voices occurred. It was a sound that none of them could produce alone. John referred to it as the fifth voice. No one could deny its uniqueness, not even he. At last, Cass had shown why she was indispensable. The origin of Cass's voice was shrouded in mystery. A falling pipe was once hers. Knocked her over and caused her vocal range to increase by 3 notes. It was a popular tale, but it wasn't based on reality. Some think she fabricated it to deflect attention away from John's initial hesitation to include her. It became ingrained in her legend for whatever reason. She immediately became the band's most famous member after joining. Their most popular songs were carried by her voice. The album California Dreamin' peaked at number 4 on the Billboard charts upon its December 1965 release. In 1966, Monday was released and went on to win a Grammy. The era was defined by their music. They were unforgettable because of Cass's voice. She had many other talents besides singing. She was gifted with making friends easily. Her energy was palpable when she was on stage. Warm and humorous, she was a star on talk shows. Even though she battled insecurities on occasion, her fans adored her self-assurance. Cass stood out during an era when female celebrities were expected to conform to a specific stereotype by being authentically herself. However, the group was dissolving behind the scenes. Their private lives were a disaster, but their music was flawless. Anxieties caused by affairs and broken hearts persisted. Michelle Phillips had an affair with Denny Doherty while she was married to John Phillips. In 1966, John was enraged upon learning the news. Singer Jill Gibson was temporarily put in charge in Michelle's place. After 2 months of fan outcry, Michelle rejoined the band. Coming next, we have Cass. Denny wasn't reciprocating her sentiments, but she still had feelings for him. On the contrary, he had feelings for Michelle. It was so painful for Cass. "You can have whichever man you desire," she once told Michelle. "Just why would you want mine?" It was a harrowing experience that encapsulated his feelings towards the group. Among 1960s folk rock acts, the Mamas and the Papas stood out. They produced 5 albums and 17 singles in the span of a few years, selling nearly 40 million records. They gave a generation a voice through their music, depicting the era's burgeoning discontent as well as its idealistic optimism. Their characteristic harmonies were on full display in California Dreamin', a song about yearning and escape that was dedicated to the one I love. In 1967, they won a Grammy for Best Contemporary Group Performance for Monday, their most famous hit. Considering the reign of rock heavyweights like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, this was an impressive feat for a folk rock band during that period. Monday became the first group's song to top the Billboard Hot 100 upon its March 1966 release. John Phillips wrote and arranged most of the songs, but the band stands out due to its eerie melody and layered harmonies. But behind the music, there was growing tension and band conflicts that began to affect the performance. Their impact went well beyond the charts, even though they were dealing with personal issues. Their 1967 performance at the legendary Monterey Pop Festival catapulted Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin to stardom. They were only there for a short while. Substance misuse and interpersonal tensions caused the band to disband by 1968. Their music has stood the test of time. Their meteoric rise to the top of the charts and Grammy victory demonstrated that folk rock could succeed in the modern music business. Cass Elliot was the motor that drove the group. She had many talents beyond singing. She was known as Mama Cass. She was a symbol of our culture. There were a lot of slim, conventionally beautiful celebrities in the music industry. Aesthetics weren't the only thing that Cass possessed. She had an enormous personality and a powerful voice. Her warm personality, self-assurance, and sense of humor were much admired by her fans. But her weight was frequently given more attention by the media than her actual abilities. There was unrelenting observation. There was continual pressure on Cass to conform to the prevailing beauty standards of her time. She lost more than 120 pounds in 1968 while attempting a risky crash diet that involved extreme. She suffered serious health complications as a result of the weight loss. Amidst it all, though, she remained true to herself. She became an icon of self-acceptance because she was genuine. Music was just one aspect of Cass's charisma. Her charming personality and sharp wit made her a popular guest on talk shows throughout the 60s and 70s. Tragically, she was unable to fully realize her gift of putting people at ease, whether they were in a television studio or at a party. She passed away from heart failure in 1974, when she was only 32 years old. Although her demise was a great loss, her impact endured. She had dared to question an industry that frequently prioritized public perception over actual ability, and the legacy she left behind is truly inspiring. Cass was more than a celebrity, she brought people together. Legend has it that the artists and musicians of her day would congregate at her Laurel Canyon home. Laurel Canyon's Gertrude Stein was known for hosting legendary musicians like Joni Mitchell and Eric Clapton at her parties. The Beatles, Frank Zappa, Jim Morrison, and others. Not merely social events, though. They were places of inspiration where bands came together to create music history. Although Laurel Canyon was already popular among creatives seeking seclusion and inspiration, Cass's house elevated it to a whole new level. Her parties were famously casual. Over music and food, newcomers and superstars mixed like a house on fire. Her living room was the site of a watershed event in rock history. Graham Nash was first encountered there by David Crosby and Stephen Stills, who subsequently formed Crosby, Stills, and Nash. While Cass's little daughter sat nearby, Eric Clapton listened to Joni Mitchell perform new songs on a different night. Despite their seeming insignificance, these events had a profound impact on the course of musical history. The celebrations mirrored the era's vibe, liberation of expression, defiance, and camaraderie. Darkness, though, was also a part of them. Like the counterculture movement itself, substance abuse was pervasive. But Cass was still the unifying force, gathering people together like no one else could. Her house served as more than just a venue for gatherings. It was the center of creative activity in the 1960s. One of the most prominent folk rock bands of the 60s was the Mamas and the Papas. Despite the fact that their harmonies were iconic, a generation was crumbling under the surface. Their 1968 breakup was caused by financial difficulties, personal betrayals, and substance abuse. Complex interpersonal dynamics were the root of the group's problems. Michelle Phillips was married to band leader John Phillips. However, Michelle was unfaithful to Denny Doherty, a bandmate of hers. Tensions were created by that betrayal and they never completely subsided. Meanwhile, Doherty wasn't reciprocating the profound emotions that Cass Elliot had for him. The complexities of their relationship seeped into their songs and daily lives. Substance abuse exacerbated the situation. John Phillips was a paranoid and domineering alcoholic who battled a heroin and cocaine addiction. Denny Doherty was a heavy drinker. It was later revealed that Michelle Phillips never set foot in a recording studio without consuming marijuana and alcohol. Their capacity to collaborate was hindered by the disorder of their way of life. The issue of funding arose once again. The band still had money problems despite selling almost 40 million records globally. Most of the band's finances were under John Phillips' control, which left the other members feeling helpless. Resentment was further fueled by arguments regarding earnings. They had hit rock bottom by 1968. Subsequently, Michelle Phillips stated that they were no longer involved. They had lost all motivation to create. Cass Elliot made the decision to depart in the same year. In 1968, she proved she could succeed without the group with her solo single, Dream a Little Dream of Me. After a series of betrayals, addictions, and financial woes, the parents formally split up. That was just the beginning of Cass Elliot's tale. Making the courageous decision to become a single mother at the tender age of 25 was her decision in April 1967. Having a child was her lifelong dream, and she went on to say that she wished she could love an animal. While Cass was still a member of the band, she gave birth to her daughter, Owen Vanessa Elliot. Because people frequently assumed she was pregnant based on her weight, she was able to keep the pregnancy a secret for months. In the 1960s, raising a child as a single parent was no picnic. Though views were beginning to change, many continued to view single mothers as an indicator of moral degradation. That wasn't going to deter Cass. While juggling a demanding career, she wholeheartedly embraced motherhood. Neither Owen nor she enjoyed being left with governesses, but she had to do it frequently. In hindsight, Owen reflected on how her mother's attachment to nannies had affected her. Regardless of the difficulties, Cass was never sorry for her decision. She proved that being a mother didn't mean sacrificing her dreams, as she built a successful solo career. Unfortunately, that success was not shared by the rest of the band. Their 1971 reunion yielded the album People Like Us, their final studio effort. The music was secondary. Funds were at issue. Not fulfilling their contract with Dunhill Records could result in fines of up to $1 million for each member. Documentary sessions were fraught with anxiety. A solo career had already been established by Cass. Actress Genevieve White was involved with John Phillips. Acting was Michelle Phillips' new passion. They were all disinterested. No one bought the album. Folks who aren't part of the group don't have the same charisma as us. Unfortunately, Cass Elliot was unwell during recording, so her powerful voice is missing from a number of tracks. Step Out, the album's lead single, almost peaked at number 81. At its highest point, the album reached position number 84. After their previous success, it was a steep decline. People Like Us sounded like it was, Michelle Phillips later admitted. All four of them are attempting to stay out of court. They broke up permanently after the album came out. The Mamas and Papas were folk rock trailblazers in the 1960s, but by the 1970s, they had seen their day come to an end. Mama, a song that launched Cass Elliot's solo career, went on to become a classic. Her 1968 album, Dream a Little Dream of Me, was released by her. Though the song itself was written in 1931, it was her rendition that brought it back into the spotlight. It was originally recorded for the album The Papas and the Mamas by the Mamas and the Papas. This song was re-released under her name after the group disbanded. Everything shifted after that choice. In September 1968, it topped the Australian charts for 2 weeks, peaked at number 2 on the Adult Contemporary chart, and reached number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. It peaked at number 8 in South Africa and number 13 in Ireland and number 11 in the United Kingdom. The single's success prompted her to release her first solo album, Dream a Little Dream, on October 19, 1968. Wally Heider's Hollywood studio was the site of the record session, which lasted only 10 days. Although she had reservations about naming it after the single at first, she eventually came around after the song became popular. The remainder of the album was completely under her creative control. She selected a variety of songs by musicians such as Graham Nash and Leonard Cohen. Folk rock with introspective themes was the sound of the album. She achieved her greatest solo success with this album, which spent 10 weeks at number 87 on the Billboard charts. Cass had 5 solo albums out between 1968 and 1973. Every one of them showcased her versatility as a musician. It was in 1969 that she released 2 of her most popular songs. Improve your musical skills by composing your own original music. The profound message of self-acceptance was conveyed in both works by Cynthia Weil and Barry Mann. The message of make your own kind of music was to be true to yourself and not worry about what other people thought. On the Billboard Hot 100, it peaked at number 36, and on the Adult Contemporary chart, it reached number 6. At its peak, It's Getting Better was at number 30. Women at the time found particular significance in the songs due to the changing social mores of the period. They regained their fame decades later, thanks to the internet and television. Different styles were featured on Cass's albums. Dream, Little Dream included renditions of You Know Who I Am by Leonard Cohen and California Earthquake by John Hartford. The 1972 release, The Road Is No Place for a Lady, relied on performances in the cabaret style. Despite critical acclaim for her powerful voice and insightful lyrics, her albums were not always successful commercially. Her interests extended beyond music. Cass also had an innate talent for entertaining, and television provided her with yet another platform to engage viewers. Joni Mitchell, Buddy Hackett, and Mary Travers of Peter, Paul, and Mary were guests on her primetime variety special, the Mama Cass television program, which she hosted. She proved she could sing in addition to her comedic and musical talents on the show. Although variety shows were common during that era, female solo artists were underrepresented. The show showcased a different aspect of her talent, even though it was not picked up for a full series. Her 1973 television return, Don't Call Me Mama Anymore, marked her return to the small screen. She had finally had enough of the Mama Cass persona by that point. Compared to her previous work, this special was completely new. The cabaret style was evident in the dramatic musical performances and comedic timing. She was daring to be herself creatively, and critics loved her for it. Her songs were both funny and moving. On top of that, Cass was a frequent guest on several of the most popular talk shows of that time. She was a frequent guest on Johnny Carson's The Tonight Show, where she promoted her new music and upcoming concerts. Her charming personality and sharp sense of humor also helped her become a fixture on variety shows like Hollywood Squares. People enjoyed watching her perform whether she was singing or simply chatting. Cass Elliot established her independence in the music industry, despite the fact that she was never as commercially successful as she was with the Mamas and Papas. New generations were still moved by her music. She was unforgettable thanks to her fearless personality and memorable television appearances. On July 29, 1974, Mama Cass Elliot passed away unexpectedly, just as her career was about to take a dramatic turn. Her age was only 32. Only 2 days prior, she concluded a 2-week sold-out solo performance at the London Palladium. She received standing ovations from the audience night after night. Several encores were performed by her. In that instant, she had exerted herself. After her band, the Mamas and Papas, broke up in 1968, she had a hard time breaking out on her own. This was her big break. At last, she was being acknowledged for her efforts. She was a celebrant right up until the day she passed away. She attended the birthday bash for Mick Jagger. A brunch was held in her honor. Although she was physically weary, she was in a good mood. Frequently, she pounded the floor. Breathing became difficult for her. Determined to savor the moment, she battled through it. She went back to the Mayfair apartment that singer-songwriter Harry Nilsson had let her borrow on the evening of July 28. Her body was discovered the following morning. Her death from heart failure while she slept was verified by the autopsy. Her heart had been weakened by years of extreme dieting. The apartment where she passed away would subsequently gain notoriety. It was in the same bedroom that Keith Moon, drummer for The Who, passed away on September 7, 1978. Hemynevrin, a medication for alcohol withdrawal, was his fatal overdose. Many people thought the room was haunted after the deaths of 2 music icons there in 4 years. It made everyone feel uneasy, even Harry Nilsson. Upon Moon's passing, he promptly sold the apartment. Rumors regarding Cass's demise circulated nearly instantly, disregarding the results of the autopsy. The most famous one was the one about the ham sandwich that she supposedly choked on. An undigested sandwich was found next to her bed by a doctor who arrived at the scene. He casually mentioned something. News outlets took it up. It quickly gained widespread acceptance. Yet, Dr. Simpson, the coroner, discovered no obstruction to her airway caused by food. Her blood test came back negative for drugs. She was completely paralyzed with grief. The rumor about the ham sandwich didn't magically spread. Alan Carr, who was Cass's manager, played a role in sustaining it. He was worried that the news would report her death as a result of a drug overdose. To him, the choking rumor constituted a compromise. However, the narrative perpetuated harmful preconceptions regarding Cass's weight. Her demise became a punchline as a result. It hid the reality for a long time. Owen Elliot Kugel, her daughter, was just 7 years old when her mother passed away. She was peppered with inquiries regarding the rumor as she matured. According to them, it was factual. Even as a child, it tormented her. The complete story was revealed to her years later. Cameron, Sue. Alan Carr allegedly asked a journalist who was close to her to spread the rumor. He wished to shield Cass's honor. A legend he made up about her, however, stuck around for a long time. Owen has devoted a significant portion of her life to rewriting history. She hopes that the truth will be remembered. Neither a punchline nor a sad headline could describe Cass Elliot. She had incredible stage presence. Her voice was truly remarkable, ranking among the most memorable of its era. Her demise is not the main plot point. That was her way of life. The impact that Mama Cass Elliot had on music will last forever. After her death in 1998, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame posthumously inducted her in 1998. Not only was her success acknowledged, but so was the enduring impact she had on folk rock. Owen Elliot Kugel, the mother whose voice had defined an era, was represented by her daughter when she accepted the honor. As a part of the Mamas and the Papas, Cass contributed to the creation of a sound that embodied the essence of the 1960s. Their distinctive sound and lush harmonies helped them become a generation's go-to musical heroes. A picture of yearning and transformation was painted by California Dreamin. The 1967 Grammy-winning single Monday, Monday reached number 1. As evidence of the group's immense popularity, the group had sold more than 40 million records globally by the time they were inducted into the Hall of Fame. At its core, it was Cass's voice. The group's harmonies gained dimension from her strong alto, which stood out. A lot of people thought her voice was the band's strongest. She kept shining even after the parents split up. She breathed new life into the classic song Dream a Little Dream of Me with her rendition. Its subsequent classic status attests to her talent for striking an emotional chord with audiences. The Hall of Fame ceremony was more than just a recognition of her accomplishments. A woman who shattered stereotypes and expectations was honored in this way.